Gentlemen, Mario Mendez here, driving, foggy, and wanted to ask you guys a couple of questions. A question and a comment. Let's start with the question first. What happened to the intros? Where are the intros? I wrote a lot of intros. I have an ego. I want to hear myself. And I'm bringing back a Voxbox because, damn it, nobody's doing any Voxboxes. We're the DigiGods, damn it, so we got to represent. Anyway, a question. And please correct me, Wade, if I'm wrong, but I know this is a blast from the past, maybe 5 years back. I think you said digital copies. What's the point of having a digital locker and stuff? You got the Blu-ray, you got the disc. What do we need digital copies for? And obviously, the world has changed since then, and when you can stream movies on a phone and stuff. And the question I wanted to ask is, I know the home video market is what you review, but there's a lot of things that are airing now that are exclusive to Amazon, exclusive to Netflix, that you guys aren't reviewing. So if I may, I want to make a recommendation myself. If you have Netflix, there's this new thriller called Hush. It's a little bit like Wait Until Dark. I don't want to give anything away, but it does require two things from you. One is to have a really good sound system or watch it with headphones because it has a very dynamic sound mix. The second thing, probably the hardest thing for home video, and that's your undivided attention, because it is about an 82-minute thriller. I'd say maybe 7 minutes of dialogue, and so it requires a lot of focus. But it's really, really good. I just recommend that one, and I wanted to see if you guys in the future, will recommend things, that aren't available through disc, be it, Daredevil or Unsinkable. Wait, what's it called? Wait a minute. Keep the tape rolling. Star Wars? Hang on. Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. No, damn it. What is? Yeah, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Anyway, so enjoy. And any thoughts? Thanks.
And thank you, Mario, the wonderful Mario Mendez, such a loyal listener and always a great contributor. And, of course, the brother of the great Mike Mendez, who, in my opinion, should be directing stuff like the Jurassic World sequel or the Godzilla sequel, which just lost...
I know, Gareth Edwards.
Gareth Edwards is the director. So, I'm officially lobbying for the Mendez touch to make its way over to the...
that sounds dirty.
Thank you, doesn't it? Anyway, so thank you, Mario. Hoping your brother gets one of those big studio shots at some point, because he'd do a much better job. He really would do a much better job. He should be on the Godzilla short list at this point. Anyway, so quick question, quick answers to the questions. The intros, I still have to finish producing them.
That's Wade's fault, by the way.
It is. It's entirely my fault. I've got a toddler. I've had film festival chores at Colcoa,
and I don't know how to do it.
And then Mark doesn't know how to do it. And then I've got Film Week Radio this week, and I got movies up coming out of my ears left and right. So I just have not set the time aside to do it. But I will do it after the show. That is a promise. I will get it done.
You promised that earlier.
You know what? I actually have some time now. My whole incredible, ridiculous streak of April and May stuff, all my chores are finally thinning out a little bit. Plus, I got sideswiped by the crazy lady in the car.
Yeah, what happened with that?
I'm still trying. The cops can't find her. They have no way of tracking her down. I talked honestly. I kid you not. Well, anyway, let me finish answering Mike's questions, Mario's questions. So, anyway, Hush, really interesting. We should check that out. There's a lot of great stuff on Amazon and Netflix that we just don't have a chance to get to. And the website, of course, the CineGods website is still coming. It's just
Wade's fault.
Again, my fault for putting it on ice because of other commitments. But that's actually going to go into overdrive this week.
Yes,
it will, and you'll be on the email chain that will. You get to drive this thing this week because I'm gonna.
Well, if you drive, it'll take forever.
It'll take forever. So
I'm
stepping back.
email the web designer 100 times a day and direct them in the right way.
Brilliant! I'm going to turn that whole monster over to you this week. This will, and
by the way, we could say this too. Is there anything you'd like to see?
Oh yeah, for sure.
On the website,
yeah.
Like Wade and I are launching CineGods website. The moment Wade gets off his ass and forwards me the name of the person we've used to design the damn thing. And we're figuring out, what we'd like to see on it. Obviously, the podcast will be on it.
Yeah.
Some of our writings will be on it. new writings and maybe old writings.
And that was the other thing, which is that yes, all of this stuff that we don't get to really deal with on the podcast, that we'll begin to be able to sort of explore that and bring other writers on and let that become a part of the overall kind of umbrella world that we're going to have on the site. So there will be reviews and blogs and tech reviews and all kinds of other interesting things over time. So we will steadily grow this. And by all means, email us, gods@digigods.com, and let us know what functions and functionality and features on the site you want to see.
No naked pictures of Wade. I'm just putting that out there. I'm not interested. Nobody's interested.
I will put that behind a firewall. How about that? Behind a paywall. I'll put it behind a paywall.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no amount of money people would pay for that. In fact, I will pay you not to look at them. So did we answer his question?
Yes, we did. I think we answered it. So yes. So the intros and yes, Mario, you wrote some awesome intros, and we're gonna get those suckers up there. It's
Wade's fault.
I have a toddler. Have I mentioned that I'm Pink Flamingo? Have I mentioned this?
You have not.
Okay, I'm Pink Flamingo now. Because her newest thing, Peppa Pig, still a fan. Shaun the Sheep, still a fan. She's still a fan of all this stuff. But she has discovered Sarah and Duck, which is another British show. It's all British. That's why my daughter says water and not water.
See, that's not good. It's not good.
Not good?
No, she's not British.
But she says water.
Yeah, but like Madonna. Remember when Madonna was affecting a British accent? We all made fun of her.
Yeah.
Don't do that to her.
Well, you know what? Christy reinforces it. Christy says water so that she keeps saying it because she thinks it's cute.
Then what I would do is I would go. Here's the thing. You're very technologically adept.
Yes.
I would go in and I would ADR all of the Peppa Pigs so that it is all American accents.
That's what I'm going to do. Well, anyway,
Have Harvey Firestein.
She loves Sarah and Duck, which is about a little girl named Sarah and her duck. But they also have a friend named John who has a pet pink flamingo. So somehow now she runs around the house quacking because she's a duck, and mommy is Sarah, and somehow for whatever reason I am Pink Flamingo. So we went from calling me Daddy to calling me Wade, which is still kind of a thing. But for substantial portions of the day, I am referred to as Pink Flamingo. So you may refer to me as Pink Flamingo if you wish.
I will not. You know what? That'll be your name behind the paywall where your nude photos are.
All right. So real quickly, also off the top, and Mario, thank you again for the question. Others who want to send in Voxboxes, gods@digigods.com, gods@digigods.com. Send us emails, whatever you want. Greatest 100 Matches is a book from WWE, and we don't often talk about books, but I just felt like I know a lot of our fans are into wrestling, and this is actually kind of a nice book. This is from the DK people who do a lot of these nonfiction kind of coffee table books, and it's nice. It's got a lot of full color stuff, and if you're really into wrestling, this is one that should be right on your coffee table, so that all of your guests can read up on the 100 greatest matches. All right. Mark, shall we got a lot of docs. We got a lot of docs to cover. So let's dive through this stack of documentaries that has sort of piled up over a while. I want to start with That's Sexploitation, which is very near and dear to my heart because, of course, Ray, who was here some weeks ago in a weird surrogate mode, Ray and I made a documentary over a decade ago called Schlock, The Secret History of American Movies, and interviewed a lot of these people, like David Friedman, and a lot of people who were really, Doris Wishman, who were central to the whole sexploitation era. And we got a lot of really great cooperation from Something Weird. Something Weird Video was really wonderful to us. They didn't charge us for, per minute or per second for using clips. There was a flat fee deal. We couldn't have made the documentary otherwise because most of these films are in the Something Weird library. And they gave us, basically a flat fee, full access to all their material for a flat amount. And it was wonderful. It enabled us to make the movie. And so we are endlessly indebted to Mike Vraney over there for doing that for us. Anyway, Mike Vraney of Something Weird produced this. So this is sort of his end of it, written and directed and edited by Frank Henenlotter. I'm not going to say that our film is better. I'm not going to say that this film is better. It's different. And the two really go together, and there's more than you can say about this particular era and these particular films than can be summed up even in two films. It really is a totality that needs to be addressed in a scholarly fashion, and all of these films are part and parcel of the story and all different perspectives. And so I would say this is a lovely Blu-ray, and I really do highly recommend it. David Friedman, of course, is all over this thing. And you get a commentary with Lisa Petrucci from Something Weird and Frank Henenlotter, the director. And it's really, really good. Now, I should also point out that Mike Vraney, who produced it and who, of course, was the brain behind Something Weird Video and with whom we met when we made the deal, he has since passed on. So Vraney was not able to do the commentary and to sort of contribute his perspective on this, but it would not have been possible without him. So, you know, if all sexploitation films specifically are the subject of this, and you don't get into obviously slasher films and gore films and a lot of the other things that we touched on. This is very, very specifically the sexploitation era, but it is a really, really don't sell it short. It doesn't treat it cheap. It doesn't treat it like some big comic joke from the '60s. It treats it as it deserves to be treated, which is a genuinely fascinating and vital piece of American film history. Worth considering, definitely something that isn't talked about enough. So that's Sexploitation from Severin. By all means, check it out.
Wait, there's an artist named Matthew Barney, and
he's married to Bjork. They're weird, both of them.
They are weird.
Next film.
He did a film that actually I saw called Drawing Restraint 9. And in this film, it takes place on this Japanese whaling vessel, and there's like 45,000 pounds of petroleum jelly on this vessel, and he's using it for an art project. It's a bizarre movie.
He's a weird man.
Because Matthew Barney is a bizarre, weird man.
He's a very weird man. And
if you want to get a sense of what Matthew Barney is really like, I would definitely check out on DVD No Restraint, which is a film by Alison Chernick. And it is all about the creation of Drawing Restraint 9 and how strange Barney is and how he went to Japan and collaborated with Bjork.
Yeah.
And they created this gigantic thing that involved the whaling vessel and Japanese rituals and tens of thousands of pounds of petroleum jelly. And you really get a sense of one of the most iconoclastic, unique, singular artists really of our time.
Yeah, freak.
There was actually a retrospective of his stuff in L.A. recently. And Matthew Barney is a very, very strange man. And if you think that, like whoever you could say is weird, like whatever artist you can
David
name,
Lynch.
Matthew Barney.
No, so far beyond.
Matthew Barney makes David Lynch look like Disney.
I had to review a Matthew Barney film once with Andy Klein on Film Week, and all I remember from that very strange thing, it had something to do with there was some vehicle that he created or something, but basically a substantial portion of the film consists of footage of him as he crawls into some space underneath, and I'm barely able to recall this because I was so horrified. He crawls into some space underneath this vehicle and basically stimulates his, well, let's put it this way. He stimulates his shaft by rubbing it on the crankshaft. How's that?
This guy...
It is... You're watching this, and I think there was clay or paper mache involved. I can't remember.
It's not pornography. It's
weird performance art stuff, and you just look at this and you just think, I don't know where this comes from, and I don't know where it's going, and I really don't...
Thing. He is, for some reason, at one point, he became so obsessed with testicles that he wound up with a 5-film cycle all about how much... And again, it's not pornographic.
No.
It's just... He's just a really unique...
that's one way of putting it. I mean, imagine being in that house with him. You know what? He and Bjork are probably totally normal at home. They probably sit around saying, "Hey, you want to watch CSI? Let's order out. Let's get Chinese." You going out? Well, let's put on the weird outfit because we don't want people thinking we're normal. All right, Bannister, Everest on the Track, the Roger Bannister story. If you don't know who Roger Bannister was, you need to. British guy who broke the 4-minute mile. And he's really a fascinating figure. I'm kind of surprised that a better narrative film has never been done about him. But anyway, this is a nice, brisk little 70-minute documentary all about Roger Bannister and his amazing accomplishment, and his whole life and backstory, and all that stuff. Really interesting, fascinating guy. And it's a totally worthwhile story, very nicely told. Nothing groundbreaking or earth-shattering, but it's a. If you don't know the story, you need to. It's just one of those great sports stories that because he's not competing against a team, he's competing against time. And a lot of people thought it was impossible, and now people break the 4-minute mile routinely. So it's it's no longer a big deal. And guys run marathons and run 4:30 miles. For 2 hours continuously. But anyway, really interesting little movie. Then we got on the Don Hardy documentary here, Theory of Obscurity, a film about the Residents. If you don't know who the Residents are, as long as we're on the subject of weirdness, Residents are definitely in the Matthew Barney on the Matthew Barney weird scale. The Residents are what happens if David Lynch were to reconceptualize Blue Man Group while on I don't know, meth or something. It's the Residents are a very strange group, and they're famous basically for wearing giant eyeballs on their heads as masks. That's kind of what defines them. But their videos are some of the tweaked, weirdest, most surreal and bizarre and disturbing things that you will ever see. If you go online and just search for the Residents and look at any of those videos, which are online, you'll have nightmares for weeks. So anyway, this is they've been around for decades and decades, and they've made over 60 albums, and nobody knows who they really are. That's what makes this thing so deeply even more disturbing than you would think just from the visuals and the music itself. So it's entirely possible there's a lot, and likely that a lot of different people have played, been a part of this, and it's kind of like a secret club in many respects, like this weird, covert, clandestine club that you get invited to, it's like Freemasonry in some way, and no one knows how many of them and who they are. It's very weird. So anyway, Don Hardy somehow convinced the manager of the Residents to let him basically be fly on the wall and to document this whole weird world that they've created, and that's what this is. And it is. I can't say it's something I really liked, but it was certainly very, very interesting.
Wait, speaking of very, very interesting, Mediterranea, absolutely heartbreaking film. This played at Cannes Critics Week last year. This is all about African migrants who want to take the rather dangerous journey via boat to Italy and hoping for a better life. And it's all about best friends. They're in Burkina Faso, and they want to go to Italy. So, the plight of immigrants obviously is a big deal here in the United States with Donald Trump, our future president. He's the worst. It's the strangest year.
It's just this is no one knows what's going to happen here. The whole world is watching us and just thinking, is this a show? Is somebody going to?
Is this what America's becoming?
Is somebody's going to walk out at some point and go, no, we're really kidding. This is. But anyway.
Anyway, so this thing, it's just riveting. It's a non-professional cast, a lot of sharply observed moments. It's just really interesting stuff. Mediterranean. It's just a beautiful. Humanistic look at the immigrant experience, and again, it did play at Cannes, so obviously there's some pedigree there. And you may want to totally check this thing out if you're into foreign cinema. If you're into documentaries, you remember a bunch of years ago there was a documentary called Winged Migration, 2001, all about big birds flying, and it made everybody love birds, just like the Penguin doc made everybody love penguins, March of the Penguins. Now we have another documentary that's similar to Winged Migration called The Messenger. And The Messenger is all about songbirds. And I got to tell you, this the guy who shot this thing, Daniel Grant, is just gorgeous. All these up close and like super slow-mo shots of these songbirds is just gorgeous. And the movie, what it really is sort of this call to action because I guess songbirds are becoming extinct. And so they want to kind of get you into the whole songbird thing and give you a sense that these birds are beautiful and they're important. And, so this guy Grant, he shot this thing at frame rates of up to like 1,000 frames a second. Okay, 1,000.
Wow.
A film is 24 frames a second.
That's like some high-speed photography.
He shot this thing 1,000 frames per second to get
You
super slow-mo of these.
You can only do that with digital cameras these days.
No, he did it by very, very quickly cranking.
Oh, he did it with a crank. An old silent film camera. He had to really bench press to be able to get up to that crank speed. Had to really get the lats going. Yeah.
Anyway, this thing is it's a beautiful documentary, and it's important. And obviously, when it comes to these sort of activist documentaries, we're into now it's all these big things like global warming and the end of the world and whatnot. Here's a small documentary about a very fascinating subject that is beautifully shot and totally worth watching. It is called The Messenger. Nice.
So here's a really just deeply disturbing film. It's called Welcome to Leith. And
I like this thing.
Did you like this?
I did.
Man, it's disturbing though.
It is.
It's creepy that this could happen. It takes place in North Dakota, and it's about this white supremacist who basically attempts to sort of take over to dominate an entire small town, and against the will of the people, to be honest. And it's really disturbing. The guy in question is Craig Cobb, who I am not familiar with. I don't really.
Why would you want to be familiar with a white supremacist?
Well, I don't know. A lot of them are famous. You sort of know some of these like Metzger, and there's a lot of these guys who they scream, "What's David Duke?" Right? There's a lot of them who sort of. They're loudmouths and they make the news because they do notorious things. I never heard of this guy, and I figure, okay, if this guy has the means, the resources to create this much trouble, and he's below the radar, that's kind of scary because that's somebody who could cause some trouble. So, and indeed he does. And
let me guess, he's voting for Trump.
Yeah. Actually, there was a really interesting interview with the Metzger guy about Trump. You should look it up. It's fascinating. They asked him, I think it was the Rap that went and dug him up and asked him and said, "So, KKK people are supporting Trump. How do you feel about that?" It is the weirdest interview that transpires. It really is. It is surreal. These people are just deranged. So anyway, speaking of deranged. This guy's deranged too, but he's dangerous, and it really is a disturbing, scary film. But it's you sort of need to know that this goes on. On a brighter side, well, somewhat brighter side of Men and War, is a documentary about war veterans who are suffering from PTSD and the treatment process and how it affects their lives at a place called Pathway Home, where you get these unique, really advanced PTSD therapies. And putting your lives back together again. This is it's a 2.5-hour long movie. It can be very grueling at times, but it is incredibly life affirming, and it'll bring you to tears. It really will. It finds hope in an almost hopeless set of circumstances. A documentarian named Don Freeman, a lot of great doc makers out there, did a really fine film called Art House, which I like architecture. I have good friends who are very daring and kind of innovative artists / architects, and I like architecture that's not just, okay, here we're going to build a thing, but we're going to make it kind of a presentation unto itself. We're going to do something that's artful and architectural all at the same time, and that is very much what this is about. It is a really, really fascinating look at a particular kind of architecture that turns homes and living spaces into works of art. And I don't know the names in particular of any of the architects that are covered in here, but wow, what a fascinating world and what interesting ways of taking something that is otherwise mundane to a lot of people and making it really, really daring. Very interesting. And then Codegirl from Kino Lorber is an okay documentary about a competition, a worldwide competition that tries to encourage more women to become computer programmers. Because most coders, most people who write programs and apps and work in the computer field and do coding are men. And not any great reason for that other than it seems that it's culturally acceptable for men to do it and for boys to do it, and it's a nerdy thing, and girls don't. It's not like a girly thing to do. So there's a competition that encourages women all over the world in different schools to participate in writing code and writing apps in these work groups. And that's basically what this is about. It's all these teams from all over the world who are trying to get to win a $10,000 prize for this international competition. And it's a little bit too much of a subject to bite off, but many of the girls are really, really cool, and you learn a lot about these different cultures and what they're facing and what they're struggling with and the taboos they're trying to beat and a lot of the socioeconomic barriers. And yet they're writing apps that do all these interesting things for their communities and for their neighborhoods. So it's a good film. Probably should be better. It's a little bit too much of a subject to tackle in one documentary, but it's still very, very. It's pleasant to watch. It's affirming. Good subject.
Yes, Wade?
Yes. Your turn.
From Nova's Memory Hackers, and as somebody who can't remember Jack S anymore, it's just the worst.
Are we continuing last week's dementia senility theme? Is that what we're doing?
I was curious about
what hackers?
This.
What is this about?
Memory hackers.
Memory.
It's about how we remember things, how we remember our past, and how far back our memory goes, and where we put like key memories and key moments of our lives. Where do they go?
Yeah.
From like a neuron perspective, And these guys, they can use this research, this total cutting edge 24th century research, to kind of get a sense from a molecular level how memory works.
Right.
They talk to this kid. He's not. I think he's like 10 or 11, but they talk to this kid who remembers everything he's ever experienced in his life because he's some sort of memory freak.
Sweet.
And so what they did is they killed him and cut his brain open. No, they didn't do that. So it's all about the mind, how memory works, how the mind can be used to trick yourself, and how the mind can be used, where memories go as you get older, how they disappear. And I found this thing totally exciting. Memory Hackers, totally. In fact, I barely remember watching it because I have Alzheimer's at this point.
Yeah.
But that was a joke. Mm-hmm. But I did like it very much. Memory Hackers.
Kind of a joke, sort of a joke.
Maybe it's for folks who are losing their memory like me.
So a couple here on art, a couple of interesting art-centric documentaries. Packed in a Trunk is all about Edith Lake Wilkinson, who, again, I don't follow enough of the art world to have known why she's significant, but she is famous. She is a lesbian artist. That doesn't mean she does lesbian art. There's no such thing. But it is significant because, when you are a lesbian and you're growing up in the 1940s, and that suddenly creates its own barriers to becoming a successful artist. In this case, that barrier was that she was sent to an asylum, and that effectively ended her life. And her genius was all packed away in trunks and thrown into an attic. And it wasn't until years later when her great niece, Jane Anderson, who is actually an award-winning television producer, and writer and director, and has worked on all kinds of really great things for HBO and other networks. She basically is the one who unravels this, and suddenly we have all of this amazing art that was locked away because of certain taboos of the time, and the artist had her career and her life prematurely ended, and it's an incredibly tragic life that comes to light through some amazing, is sort of redeemed by all of these amazing paintings. And they are amazing. They are almost Van Gogh-like in their use of color and their use of perspective, and just the way that she saw the world. It's really, it makes you sad and happy all at the same time. So definitely worth checking out. This is Packed in a Trunk, really a wonderful, wonderful film. And then slightly less wonderful, but perhaps equally interesting in many respects, is an essay movie called Toyen, which is a documentary about about Toyen, who is a surrealist Czech painter, directed by the Czech New Wave director Jan Nemek. Jan Nemek, or Nemec, depending on how you choose to pronounce it. Very influential Czech New Wave director, and tries to sort of illuminate the work of Toyen in a political context here. That's the whole idea, because being opposed to Czech communism during that period was was really what art was your protest, art was your weapon. So that's what the approach is here. This is essentially an essay film, and it is a DVD-R, so you have to order it directly from Facets, and it is worth checking out if you are an art film or an art history film buff.
I'm not quite sure how to explain a documentary called Dreams Rewired. All I can say is that it was completely fascinating. It was directed by 3 people, and it's actually it's very academic, but when you watch it, you sort of see a theme emerging. It uses early film, early radio, talks about television, and all these different means of communication and how they have connected all of us together and sort of driven technology into the future. Because as a people, we are a naturally connected people. We want to be connected by shared experiences.
Sure.
And so
I don't really want to be connected to you, but I get what you mean. You mean in a more general sense.
Because of the paywall of nude photos
exactly.
on our new site.
Yeah.
And so you get something like maybe from the telephone, where you could call somebody in another city and connect themselves with them, whereas normally
nice.
you can only do that via mail.
Sure.
You get something like film, where people they don't realize that early film was like 80% of the country would go see a film every week.
Yep.
Because it was the first, even more than the theater, the first truly mass communication experience that everybody wanted to experience on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm.
And then came television,
yeah,
where you get 50 million people at the time in the early days, 50 million people watching the same show. So again, it gets rather academic, but this documentary, fascinating, called Dreams Rewired, is all about how these shared experiences help shape who we are and help shape the future. So I would definitely check this out, Dreams Rewired. It is such a big subject. It took 3 people to direct this thing, but it was narrated in rather unique fashion by Tilda Swinton. So if you're into the Tilda Swinton, and of course who isn't, then you will enjoy this very lively...
Tilda.
Huh?
Love Tilda.
Lots of great old footage in this thing. I mean, we're talking films from the 1880s. So anyway, good stuff. Dreams Rewired. Don't get scared by the academic nature of it. It's really good stuff. Also good is a documentary that I flipped through because I have no interest in visiting Ecuador, although I did really enjoy the topography and staring at the food. It's a beautiful country, and it is
hot and wet.
Hot and wet, and it features the president of the country, Rafael Correa. And I mean, I guess I got a little bit more of a sense of Ecuador and why I might want to visit, but I don't really want to visit Ecuador.
Continuing our art theme is Troublemakers, the story of land art, from documentarian James Crump. I can't say I'm really into land art. Didn't really know it existed. Still not quite sure what the point is, but I get it. It's like people who whenever they have whenever you have like the Tour de France, there will be a lot of farmers in France who will go out with a tractor and they will plow some picture in their cornfields or their wheat fields so that you can see it from a helicopter, and you go, oh, isn't that nice? It says, go Lance, go, or stop drugging, or whatever, stop doping. That's a little bit of the kind of thing going on here. Land art became a thing, I guess, in the 1960s. And you had a lot of people who would go and they'd do these weird landscape, kind of create things, like stuff that you can only see from helicopters and airplanes. Anyway, this revisits a lot of that stuff, and it had a moment back then, primarily 1960s, maybe dipping into the 1970s. And I don't really kind of get what the point was, or it almost seems more like vandalism on a level to me. I hope I'm not insulting anybody by saying that. But anyway, so it's like graffiti is one thing. You can wash it off, and it's you put it onto man-made walls. But this is like, I don't know. I don't get it. But anyway, so that's an interesting doc. Troublemakers, the story of land art. It is provocative, if nothing else.
Hang on, let me throw in a documentary that you may want to buy for your grandmother or grandfather. More like grandmother, but I mean that seriously. A documentary called I Know a Woman Like That. And I Know a Woman Like That is a wonderful documentary about women who are getting older. They're in their late 60s, they're in their 70s. And it's a time when people just assume that older folks just like disappear, and because they're not out there, on their iPhones playing Angry Birds. But actually, they live vital lives. They have their own hobbies, and they've made their own choices. And it's great stuff. There's some famous women of that age in there. Eartha Kitt, Lauren Hutton is in there too. So Gloria Steinem, obviously, who is in the news all the time. So I Know a Woman Like That is all about how just because you're a woman who is growing older doesn't mean you have to give up on life.
Nope.
And it is inspiring, and I just thought it was terrific.
And then a couple from PBS. 10 That Changed America. These are things that changed America, architecturally, design-wise, et cetera, et cetera. So we're talking like homes, entire communities, landscape design. It's a very broad. It's a very broad perspective that they take on things that change. But what they wanted were sort of anything that was broadly architectural. So not just an actual individual house or building or a thing, but thing that includes landscape architecture and entire architectural developments. And so it's really a very, very open architectural consideration. But it wants to sort of make the point that these 10 things actually changed the country. With respect to urban planning, with respect to suburban planning, with respect to community planning, with just the general aesthetic. So, and it's interesting. I don't know that I necessarily agree that these are the 10 that changed America, but they are certainly interesting. You obviously get like the Eames home from Charles and Ray Eames. You obviously get Falling Water by Frank Lloyd Wright. Those things go without saying. And then you get stuff like Monticello. And it's worth checking out. I mean, only if you're really, really interested in the subject matter, but it's it's an interesting journey. And then Iceman Reborn is an installment of Nova that goes into the Ice Mummy and what we have learned from the Ice Mummy. If you aren't familiar with the Ice Mummy, this is a guy who was murdered 5,000 years ago. They named him Otzi, and when they unearth this mummy, this is one of the most well-preserved glacial age mummies ever, and they immediately started violating him and dissecting him and analyzing him to see what they could learn about our ancient past. And what they found out was that basically he interrupted somebody's television viewing time, and that's why they killed him. So things haven't really changed in 5,000 years.
You know what? I'm telling you, people love Golden Girl reruns.
They do.
And that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So
horrible.
You know what? You remember that Timothy Hutton film, Iceman?
Yeah,
it's a good movie.
Yeah.
He plays a guy who was buried in the ice for thousands and thousands of years, and is resurrected.
All right, classic stuff. We got a ton of classic stuff. We're gonna burn through this stuff and try to get through it by the end of the show. Mark, tell us what spectacular glories we have on Criterion this week.
Wade, sometimes there are films when you think to yourself, yes, Criterion's doing that one. Mm-hmm. The Player.
Which I saw at Cannes. I still remember, man. That was
okay. Drop the name.
I'm dropping it because it was just such an awesome revelation. It was Altman was at Cannes with The Player, and it was about the movie biz, and everybody was very excited, and it turned out to be even better than anyone imagined. It was amazing.
What's funny? It is because the movie is not only a great film on its own, but it is also this like representation of what Altman thought about the industry.
And that cool opening single take shot.
And that great opening single take shot.
Which is just cool. Because it just takes you through studio offices, and it sort of insinuates you onto a studio lot in a very, very interesting way. It's great.
Well, but Altman had this weird relationship with Hollywood, and he was very cynical about it, and he loved it as much as he hated it, it seemed to me.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
This film sort of brings all that, not only all that to bear, but it's also a great amalgam of his styles. The overlapping dialogue and the wit, right? It's all there in The Player, and it looks great. Criterion did an amazing job with it. And I just feel like, obviously Altman did great comedies. He did MASH. He did great westerns. He did, McCabe and Mrs. Miller. He reinvented the detective picture pretty much with The Long Goodbye. But with The Player, he just knocks it out of the park. This thing is funny, and it is insightful, and it is witty, and it is, in a way, it's almost the ultimate Robert Altman film, because it is not only stylistically does it combine everything he's good at, but the subject matter obviously is so close to him, because it's really about just the caustic, nasty, mean underbelly of Hollywood, which I think is what Altman really thought of the industry.
Well, I mean, the part where Peter Gallagher is talking about, like, we could replace writers. that was a big laugh at the time, where it was like, oh boy, can you imagine that? It was like an exaggerated view of Hollywood cynicism. It felt like a metaphor, for like an exaggerated metaphor for just how horrible the business was. And now we get to a place where people actually are almost saying that. Like, we could do away with writers. We could do a movie that just basically is written by fans or the rights itself. It's amazing how close we've come to the edge.
And yet, what I find odd about it, not odd, but wonderful about it, is that it's not mean. It's really not mean-spirited.
No, it's not.
It's kind of a fun, funny movie.
It is.
Even though there's a lot of venom in the way that this is really what Altman kind of thinks of the underbelly of Hollywood.
Isn't that Altman's personality?
It's Altman's personality. This movie is Altman's personality, stylistically and also psychologically. It is Altman, and but yet it is still really funny.
Yeah,
it's vicious. It's vicious and satirical, but it's not mean-spirited. And so The Player is just fantastic, and this is a must-buy. And Criterion knocks it out of the park. 4K digital restoration. There's an old audio commentary with Altman, which is great, from 1992. New interviews with Tim Robbins, and Cannes Film Festival stuff from 1992. In fact, I think you may even see Wade there.
Yeah,
because he's dropping names. So now there's some deleted scenes and outtakes, which is great. And you have to buy this now. You have to buy The Player on Criterion right now. This moment.
I agree.
Exactly.
It's one of the best Criterions I've had in a while.
Now, The Naked Island is a film that I wasn't as familiar with, but I think it's terrific. It's a Japanese film from 1960. It's about a small family, and they're trying to make it happen on this small island off Japan over the course of like 1 year. And they're the only ones who live on the island, and they survive by, they farm and they plow and they sort of fend for themselves, and they have to like carry the water for the plants by themselves. And it just starts there. It's just a very interesting film. It's there's very little dialogue. In fact, I'm trying to remember now in the film. Is there no dialogue in this movie? There's actually no dialogue in this movie now that I'm looking back on it. So there's no dialogue in the film, and yet it is totally riveting. 96 minutes, so it's not like you have to stare to... It's basically a silent film. I mean, it's funny, like you say, oh, there's no dialogue. That's so unusual. Well, the first, 30 years of, or let's say, 30 years of film, there was no dialogue.
It's like the Shaun the Sheep movie. You watch the Shaun the Sheep movie, and you're loving it, and it takes you... I mean, you realize that, at a certain point, you're like, wait a minute, I've been watching this for an hour, and no one has actually said a word. It's all just grunts and sounds and oohs and ahs.
It's great.
Yeah.
In terms of... extras, obviously the film is a little bit obscure, so there's not the enormous amount of extras that you're used to on Criterion, but there is an audio commentary featuring Kaneto Shindo from 2000. There's Benicio del Toro. He's a huge fan of the film, so they actually dug him up and they had him film some sort of appreciation for, which is pretty good. And so there you go. I would definitely check out The Naked Island. It's a unique film from a country where, like in 1960, post-war, they're kind of, they're getting their cinema on, and it's great.
All right, got some Warner Archive titles here, which I'm going to go through really quickly. A couple of Blu-rays, a couple of fantastic Blu-rays. The less known one here is Susan Slept Here, which was the last film that Dick Powell ever made. Dick Powell and a very young Debbie Reynolds. And this is a really terrific romantic comedy with a little bit of an edge to it from 1954. Not the kind of thing that you would necessarily expect from this period. This was an RKO film, 1954. Basically, Frank Tashlin, who did a lot of great Jerry Lewis movies, directed this about a really troubled young woman who was 17 who is basically a cop brings her to Dick Powell to prevent her from getting any worse. She's got all, to sort of whip her into shape. And he decides the only way to do that is to marry her and then divorce her when she turns 18. I don't want to get into any of the marriage laws. I know people are thinking, wait, how do you marry a 17-year-old? Isn't this kind of twisted and pervy? And isn't there kind of a Lolita thing going on? Yes, and yes, and yes, and don't ask about it. It's 1954. It's explained, and the film gets through all that stuff. But I would love to, at some point, talk to Alonzo about this, because this is, in theory, a Christmas film. And, because the whole thing takes place in and around Christmas, and I would love to know Alonzo's opinion of this, because it is definitely one of those tweaked Christmas films that he often talks about. and he is the expert. Anne Francis co-stars. Otherwise, Debbie Reynolds, wonderful. Dick Powell, wonderful. And speaking of Debbie Reynolds, you know that documentary at Cannes all about her relationship with Carrie Fisher is getting rave reviews. You heard about that?
Say again?
There's the documentary with at Cannes with all about Debbie Reynolds and Carrie Fisher and their relationship. It's getting all kinds of crazy rave reviews.
Really? I didn't even know that existed.
Also from the Warner Archive collection on Blu-ray, a long overdue, wonderful Blu-ray. My goodness, this looks great, and it's just wonderful, and thank goodness they did this. Made on demand Blu-ray, Suspicion, the Alfred Hitchcock classic with Cary Grant and Joan Fontaine. I adore Joan Fontaine, even though she was the first one to go, and she always said that Olivia de Havilland would probably be angry if she beat her to that as well. And Olivia de Havilland's going to turn 100. Is it this year or next year?
I don't know
She's
that off
99.
the top of my head.
She's 99. It's crazy.
Cray.
Crazy. I'm pretty sure. You might want to check that up. Anyway, so the idea here is it's basically about a woman who marries someone who it turns out may be a murderer and on the verge of murdering her. And, Joan Fontaine is just so good at these kinds of parts. It's a little bit of Rebecca in there. This was made in 1941, the year after Rebecca. So she's definitely playing to audience expectations of who she is, and she does it brilliantly. Cary Grant, equally brilliant. Cedric Hardwicke, Nigel Bruce, a lot of other great supporting performers here. And a fantastic screenplay co-written by Samson Rafelson. If you don't know that name, one of the great screenwriters in the history of the Golden Era. And then we also have, on regular DVD-R, still part of the Warner Archive MOD, The First 100 Years with Robert Montgomery and Virginia Bruce, which is a cute, sweet sort of comedy of manners, I guess is probably the best way to put it. It takes place in Massachusetts, and a lot of, that old snappy banter that people just sit around, in drawing rooms and in nice restaurants, and just it bounces back and forth, and it's that kind of stuff they just don't write anymore. It's just really, really nicely put together. That's a fun film. A Yank at Oxford, starring Robert Taylor. Basically, just one of those movies about life at Oxford and how rough it can be and how sophisticated it can be, and most of it centering on college athletics. And it's fine. I wouldn't call it amazing or anything, but it's a nice little golden era throwback. And then we have Cinema's Exiles, From Hitler to Hollywood. This is particularly interesting, actually. This looks at movies between 1933 and 1939 when there was a huge exodus from the German film industry into Hollywood. Obviously, seeing the writing on the wall, and a lot of these are, in the silent era, Germany was the equal. The Weimar cinema was the equal to Hollywood in the world. Hollywood did not become dominant until after World War II. That was when Hollywood became the dominant film industry to the exclusion of all the others, because World War II destroyed the German and the Italian and the French film industries.
Well, F.W. Murnau and Fritz Lang, they all came over and made amazing films.
They made it. Well, this is about the 1933 to 1939 period. Just once Kristallnacht happened and the writing was on the wall, just about every Jew in Germany said, "I'm going to keep my career going in that other industry," and we benefited. And really tremendous story here. So this is Cinema's Exiles, From Hitler to Hollywood. It deals with Billy Wilder, Fritz Lang, Peter Lorre, Franz Waxman, Fred Zinnemann, on and on and on. And when you think about the movies that they made that we wouldn't have or that would be different if not for them, it's like they reinvented Hollywood.
Well, what's funny is that if you look at American film versus, let's say, European film, the Germans had it on us in the early days of film.
Oh,
if you
by
look
far.
at like Nosferatu and some of these like classic expressionism films, Metropolis, they had it on us big time.
Big time.
We might have had the technology,
Sure.
And and Charlie Chaplin, of course, was not even American, but Charlie Chaplin maybe had that, was able to combine like comedy and pathos, whatever. But the Germans, in terms of shooting, in the early days, they really had it on us. So when they came over and brought some of that sensibility to our films, it made our films better.
Yep, absolutely true. And then Marion Davies stars for director Robert Z. Leonard in Marianne. This was an MGM film from 1929. This is really right there on the cusp of, silent to sound. And so the audio is really raw. I have to say, Warner did an unbelievable job of burnishing this up and really kind of giving it a little shine and a sheen for DVD release, especially considering it's a DVD-R. But it still has the old movie feel to it. And it's wonderful. If you don't understand why Marion Davies was such a wonderful star and why she continued to be one, why making the transition to the talkies worked for her, here you go. This is beautiful. This spells it out for you. So for film history buffs, this is a really fun jump back in time. Definitely check it out. Marianne, a wonderful, wonderful showcase for Marianne Davies and all of her inimitable talents.
I have something wonderful.
I know you do.
Wade, Kelly Reichardt is probably the best director whose films you've never seen. He's the best American director whose films you've never seen.
She makes films that are so slow, they almost don't move. It's almost like a single frame. I
love them. I think they're incisive, they're funny, and I got to say, Oscilloscope did a great job re-releasing River of Grass,
which is the one that really kind of put her on the map in many respects.
Yes, because I want to see a movie where, and I think you want to see a movie too, where people pass marijuana joints. People pass them between each other using their feet.
Yeah, that's great.
I would like.
I'm not a big fan of this film. I'm not really a fan of
her.
No, I'm not. But
really? Wendy and Lucy, Meek's Cutoff is good stuff.
But I understand why Wendy and Lucy. Yes, there are some moments there. I understand what people like about her films. There's an honesty, and she lets her characters breathe and lets scenes kind of unfold in real emotional time, and doesn't really sort of force the issue. Nothing feels inauthentic. I get all of that. It just I don't particularly enjoy watching them.
Well, this one is this one has a bit of a crime, bit of crime plot in it too, which you might kind of like. It's about these two lovers; they're on the run, and it takes place in South Florida, which seems like the type of place where just lonely, dead inside people would like kind of go and hang out. And they're these two lovers. They're taking a swim, and a gun goes off, and then that kind of gets the plot going. And I just think this thing was great. It really set the stage for who Kelly Reichardt would eventually become. And what's funny is that she really hasn't changed that much since this film in terms of budgets. Maybe, she gets Michelle Williams to star in her films, right?
Yeah, often. Yeah.
Because I think Michelle Williams was in... No, was it...
the Lucy thing.
The Lucy thing, right.
Yeah, with the dog.
That was good.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is Kelly Reichardt's film debut, and it was just terrific. So we have that, and on the other end of the spectrum, we have Hired to Kill, which Arrow, for some reason, has... decided is worth a Blu-ray and a DVD collection.
This is a strange one. I most of the Arrow stuff I kind of look at and I go, thank goodness they brought that out. Black Caesar or whatever else. But this is one I was like,
a little
really?
weird. I mean, it's about this guy plays this mercenary. He's hired by George Kennedy, who plays this CAA guy, to go into the Mediterranean and try to rescue a rebel leader.
It's not a particularly good film, and it's not really a cult film. It's just
a weird little movie.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, people love it because Oliver Reed wears the most bizarre mustache you've ever seen in your life.
It's true.
And actually, they have it on they have it on the box.
Yeah,
I mean, come on, what's he doing with that thing?
I don't know.
It's like things like a character of its own.
Yeah.
Anyway, the thing is pretty preposterous, but I guess there's some colorful locations to look at, and Oliver Reed chews the scenery, and I guess it's fine, but I think Arrow's done better than Hired to Kill.
Yes, they have.
Also, we have A Married Woman by Jean-Luc Godard, and I'm going to say something about Jean-Luc Godard.
Yeah.
Never my favorite.
No, mine neither.
I'm supposed to love him because we love film, but I just don't. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
Anyway, but Cohen Film. And they're just wonderful. We love Cohen Film. They came out with this and did a pretty good job. 2010 interview with Agnes B. is involved in this, and also a 2010 interview with a Godard scholar, which definitely helps because Godard films obviously are a little impenetrable, and that is not by accident. And so, so it's about this woman who wants to get a divorce, and she's also got a lover who she has a child with, and it sort of goes on from there. So, A Married Woman. I don't know if this is one of Godard's best films, but it was pretty well received at the time, especially at the Venice Film Festival.
All right. And then I got 3 here from the MOD line over at 20th Century Fox and MGM. They have their Fox Cinema Archives and MGM limited edition releases. And we got 1 from MGM and 2 from Fox. all in the standard MOD packaging. Actually, I'm sorry, 2 from MGM, 1 from Fox. I take that back. The Fox one is On the Threshold of Space, which was a big CinemaScope production back in 1954. 1956. And I can't say that this is a particularly good film, but it was one of those big CinemaScope demos at the time. 1956 was the year that everything kind of changed. That was the year that Around the World in 80 Days won Best Picture, and with Todd-AO, which was a rival widescreen format. Everything was widescreen. Everything was about showing off Cinerama, CinemaScope, this scope, and that Rama. Everything was all about showing off this new, the whole new widescreen era. And so this is trying to combine that with the excitement about the space program, which, by the way, in 1956 was not really even much of a reality. It was more theory than anything else. Sputnik didn't go up until the following year. So this is all kind of looking down the line and trying to combine real-life space enthusiasm with widescreen excitement. And it's okay. It's a nice little flashback, pretty well put together, but otherwise it ain't no right stuff. And then on the MGM line, the Race for the Yankees Zephyr, which is kind of a middling movie with Ken Wall and Donald Pleasance racing George Peppard to try to find an old wrecked World War II plane that may have $50 million in it. Meh, it's okay. More worth seeing just because of who's in it. And then one of my all-time favorites, Year of the Comet. And by all-time favorites, I mean not even remotely. This is a strange Peter Yates misfire that looks really good, but never quite gels. Decent cast. Louis Jourdan still got it going on in this, and Ian Richardson, Penelope Ann Miller, and Tim Daly, very very engaging. But the whole kind of it's sort of a Hepburn Tracy chemistry that they're going for, and it doesn't quite work. So, but anyway, Penelope Ann Miller and Tim Daly, still a lovely couple. If you like them, in spite of the fact that their chemistry doesn't really hold together in this sort of capery comedy. Romantic chemistry thing, then if you just want to see them, by all means check it out. But that's on MOD from the Manufacturer on Demand line, the MGM Limited Edition collection from MGM and 20th Century Fox. All right, Mark, I got a whole ton of Olive titles here.
You have a whole ton of olives?
A whole ton of olives. We got a blazing set of releases from Olive this month. Most of them are really, really noteworthy. Maybe not my favorite films, but they are significant and they are somebody's favorite films. So I'm going to start with the lone DVD in this thing, which is Legend of the Lost, which is a strange combination of talent. If you didn't know, John Wayne and Sophia Loren actually did star in a movie together, and this is it, Legend of the Lost. Sophia Loren had a lot of weird pairings in her career. I mean, and they weren't necessarily great movies, but she somehow got around and made a movie with just about every major male actor in Hollywood. Rather extraordinary. This takes place in the Sahara. Rosanna Brazzi is also in this. This was made in 1957. We're stuck in the 50s quite a lot today. And it is essentially a Western that takes place in the Sahara, which seems to be the only way that they could justify pairing up John Wayne with Sophia Loren. Beautiful photography. It has kind of the whole idea is about finding the lost city of Ophir, where there's a treasure, and it's one of those usual kind of the pot boiler old Indiana Jones type things, where people are looking for something archaeological, and there's a certain thing to that. But really what you're watching it for is Jack Cardiff's amazing cinematography, which is just gorgeous and makes Sophia Loren looks gorgeous. Doesn't really make John Wayne look gorgeous, but I guess that's the point to John Wayne. He is gorgeous. All right. And then we've also got The Private Affairs of Belle Amie with George Sanders and Angela Lansbury, both of whom are magnificent with dialogue. This is actually a really, really fun film directed by Albert Lewin in 1946. based on the Guy de Maupassant novel Belle Amie. And it's just delightful. It's exactly what you'd expect. A lot of great dialogue, fun, beautiful photography, fun back and forth. Angela Lansbury is just terrific. I mean, young in a way that you look at this and you're like, that's the lady from Murder, She Wrote. She's young and hot and scorching and cool. And George Sanders, always so sophisticated. Really, really a fun film. And then the very weird but culty Zapped with Scott Baio and Willie Ames. Man, this thing just continues to live on. This has been released many times on DVD. It is now finally out on Blu-ray, courtesy of Olive. What a great get for them. 1982, kind of a quintessential youth film from 1982 when both Willie Ames and Scott Baio were... they were a thing, right? They had their moment, and this was their moment. And this was supposed to be their big movie moment. Didn't really turn into it. But... It was also at that time when kids and the whole thing was remember my science project and Weird Science and all that stuff. This is a little bit kind of presaging that vein of strange movies that would dominate the 80s, giving kids telekinetic powers and to do all kinds of really goofy, untoward kid things. And then actually one of the actresses in the film. It also shows up in Rich Kids. That is Trini Alvarado. Trini Alvarado also had a moment. She is in 1979's Rich Kids. And this is not a particularly good film, I don't think, but it had a moment because it was directed by Robert Young, and it was written by the very talented Judith Ross. And it had a bit of a following, and it dates kind of poorly, but... I don't know. There's something charming about the whole young romance thing, the way that it's depicted here. Robert Altman was an executive producer on this. It was actually produced by the Canadian company Lionsgate. That is Lion apostrophe S.
Not the Lionsgate.
Space Gate, which would go on to become the current Lionsgate. Yes. So this is one of their earliest. The previous incarnation of that company actually was involved in making this at the time. So I mean, it's that's more nostalgia than anything else. Speaking of kids with powers, the more recent Cody Banks series with Frankie Muniz now makes it in Agent Cody Banks, along with Agent Cody Banks 2, Destination London. Both of these are now out from Olive on Blu-ray. And I was never a fan of these, but a lot of people love these movies. Harold Zvart, the Norwegian director who directed Agent Cody Banks, He's okay. He didn't direct the sequel. Kevin Allen directed the sequel, but I don't know. I mean, whatever. If those films really make you happy, and then I'll finish the rest of the. Actually, go ahead and talk about those. I'll finish these when you're done.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wade, one of the most important films we'll talk about this week, I think, obviously the player being the number one, is Manhunter. The Manhunter was directed by Michael Mann and co-stars William Peterson from Live to Live and Die in L.A. And why is this movie important, Wade? Because it stars Brian Cox as Hannibal Lecter.
I love this movie.
Some people prefer this over Silence of the Lambs. I don't understand that part, but some people do.
I kind of prefer it over Silence of the Lambs. I think Silence of the Lambs is a better, more effective film. But here's what I like. This is a very 80s movie. I like Brian Cox as Hannibal Lecter better than Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter, because Anthony Hopkins is playing up the psycho part of it. He's just you look at him playing that part and you think nobody would ever go to you as a doctor. Nobody would ever see you. They just wouldn't. You're just weird and creepy, and I can tell you're a psychopath. Brian Cox underplays it in this thing. He's sitting behind that glass, and when William Peterson goes to see him, you just think, well, why is this guy behind glass? Doesn't seem to be anything wrong with him. And eventually the manipulative psychopath shows itself and gets under his skin and inside his head. It's a much more... He gets the character better. He wasn't ever going to win an Oscar for it because he's not chewing the scenery, but it is a better representation of who that character is.
Well, the thing with Hopkins is that he was only in that film for 20 minutes or something.
Yeah.
But yet his presence was in the film the entire way through.
Owns it.
He owns the whole movie.
It's a little bit the same here.
Yeah, well, this one is it's a little bit it's similar to Silence of the Lambs. It's actually based on the on Thomas Harris's novel Red Dragon, which would be remade
by Brett Ratner.
Which means that you should go ahead and see Manhunter because Brett Ratner is terrible and horrible. Although I have to say, as a producer, Brett Ratner he kills it.
Yeah, it's true.
As a producer?
Yeah.
Makes good movies.
Yeah, no, that everything that Rat Pack has been financing
Yes,
is great.
Absolutely. It's just the
want
most bizarre turn of events for that guy.
I stop directing movies, just finance and produce them, and we'll be good. We'll be good.
Anyway, William Peterson plays he's an FBI. He was an FBI profiler, and he gets pulled back in to help find this serial killer known as the Tooth Fairy. And just like Silence of the Lambs, in order to kind of get into the mind of the Tooth Fairy, he's got to converse with Hannibal Lecter. So yeah, I have to say that Shout Factory did a great job with the Blu-ray. Just fantastic new interviews with the DP Dante Spinati, who's one of the greats. William Peterson, Tom Noonan, and Joan Allen, who was in this.
Tom Noonan is chilling in this movie. He is so freaky. I've never been able to watch him in any other part and take him seriously.
Because like he
scares me.
He wears that weird like supervillain.
Yeah, when he puts
on his head.
Yeah, so creepy.
Anyway, there's 2 discs of this. There's a director's cut. There's an audio commentary by Michael Mann, which is great. Because Michael Mann is so smart and specific in terms of his intentions and how he achieved them that any Michael Mann audio commentary is worth it. He's not the most hilarious guy on an audio commentary, but you'll learn a lot. So Manhunter is a great film and a great piece of history. And even though, as Wade says, it's a little 80s, it's still just a terrific movie and an important film, especially considering where that series and where that character would go to Best Picture Oscar-winning success.
Yes.
So there's that, and then we also have a movie called I Saw What You Did, which is not a good movie, but it's got a cool premise. People don't really do this anymore in the age of social media, but when I was a kid, we used to do crank calls.
Yeah.
You just call random people and say stupid things, and then see how long it would take them to figure out that you're actually an idiot. This movie is about these 2 kids, and they would call people, and they would say, "I saw what you did." And then the other person on the line would either say they either figure it's just a prank, or maybe you would call somebody who just murdered his wife, and then when he hears "I saw what you did," it starts this whole little turn of events. So it's a cool little premise. I wish the movie was better. It's with Joan Crawford. It does have some historical significance in that it stars Joan Crawford and was written or produced and directed by William Castle. Now, William Castle who was one of the great horror showmen.
The exploitation filmmaker who worked for the studios at Columbia at the time. Yeah,
and he was the guy who he was a great ringman, a great marketer of his movies. The guy who would make a film, and then in the print ads it would say, "We've hired a nurse to show up to every screening of this film. So if anybody faints, there'll be a nurse there to revive you."
Great
and
stuff.
He would create these great carnival atmospheres for his movies, and Castle was the best. So it does have historical significance. It does have a great premise, although it's not a great movie. I Saw What You Did. And then finally, at least for me, we have Bad Influence. Now, Bad Influence is with Rob Lowe and James Spader, and it sort of came out during that less than zero kind of 80s. People are looking at like cocaine was the drug of choice back then. And there was a lot of movies like Apartment Zero, or again, Less Than Zero, and Bad Influence. And it was all about people sort of diving into this like big city cosmopolitan success stories where these kids would get really, really successful and kind of rich at a young age, and
they'd reap have to pay the price.
They'd have to pay they just devolved into some coke lifestyle and some lifestyle like hookers and coke and whatever, and then they'd have to pay the price. And Bad Influence is one of those films. The only reason why this film was any good was because it was directed by Curtis Hanson. So it was written by David Koepp, but directed by Hanson, and Curtis Hanson is very much interested. He's very much interested in the characters, whereas a lot of directors would not be. So that's why Bad Influence works as well as it does.
All right, and here's wrapping out the rest of the Olive titles, and this is the cream of the crop here. Telly Savalas had primarily known for his television career later on with Kojak and whatnot, but Telly Savalas made some awfully cool movies, and one of them was as late as 1975, and Killer Force is one of those movies. And O.J. Simpson's presence in this will probably be a turnoff to a lot of people, but what a great cast. What a really, really cool kind of tough guy squad movie. There were a lot of these, Dirty Dozen and the original Inglourious Bastards. There were a lot of these kinds of movies at the time. And 1975 is a little late for these, especially for Val Guest, who directed this, who was primarily known for genre films in the 1960s. But somehow it all comes together, and it is a really cool throwback movie here with Telly Savalas and Christopher Lee, O.J. Simpson, really Peter Fonda. This is a really super cool cast, and the idea basically is that Telly Savalas leads he's a security officer for a diamond syndicate, and the whole thing gets into the smuggling of diamonds and smuggling them in and out of South Africa. It's really kind of a cool movie and a little bit ahead of its time. Here's the other stuff that we're getting from Olive this month. French Postcards. Fascinating, interesting movie. Not a great film by any means, but an interesting movie where Willard Huck and Gloria Katz, who are old friends and colleagues of George Lucas, and who wrote American Graffiti, they're basically trying to do an American Graffiti Part 2 that takes place with a bunch of American students at a French school, an Institute of French Studies. And it's not enough to erase the fact that they went on to do Howard the Duck, but it is interesting that they're sort of trying to replicate the chemistry and that whole sense of camaraderie. And there's some really good performances here. Deborah Winger and Mandy Patinkin. Definitely worth checking out. It's a curious little blast from the past. The Whoopee Boys with Michael O'Keefe and Paul Rodriguez. Really interesting only because Paul Rodriguez, this is sort of him at his best. This is when Paul Rodriguez was a thing in 1986. Michael O'Keefe is kind of along for the ride. Not the greatest pairing in the world, but a kind of a quintessential 80s comedy, well directed by John Byram, who should have had a better career. A terrific film is The Sum of Us with Jack Thompson and Russell Crowe before Russell Crowe really blew up huge as a star. This is about a tough Aussie dad trying to sort of be as accepting as he possibly can over the fact that his son is gay. This film is so funny and so charming and so sweet and so wonderful, and it's not the kind of part you would ever imagine Russell Crowe playing. So it's definitely worth checking out. My favorite line in this, up ya bum. It's a great, great movie. Iphigenia with Irene Pappas is a Michael Kakayanis film. Michael Kakayanis, who did Zorba the Greek, also with Irene Pappas. This is essentially his Oscar-nominated 1977 incredibly cool adaptation of Euripides with Costa Kazakos as Agamemnon and Tatiana Papasmokou as Iphigenia. Really a great film, probably the best adaptation of Euripides, which is infrequently made into movies, but has been several times. And then lastly, the wonderful and delightful late career success of Clark Gable in The King and Four Queens, which is just terrific. Clark Gable in one of his best parts as this amazing Western con man. 1956, a brisk, wonderfully written, incredibly well-directed movie by Raoul Walsh that is just to die for. Clark Gable and Eleanor Parker have never been better. You got to check this out. This is the gold release this month from Olive. So, great bunch of movies. All right, Mark, I think that does it for the show.
That does it for the show.
We are done. See you next week.
See you next week.